Welcome. Tonight, we'll journey far from the neon cities of modern Japan and step quietly into a world of mist-draped valleys, wooden sandals, and fields of carefully cultivated rice. This is a Japan of centuries long past, when steel blades and lacquered armor governed not only the battlefield, but the rhythm of daily life itself. This was the era of the samurai, not the romantic warriors of myth and film, but men of war, of structure, of obligation. And beneath their armored feet came the quiet footsteps of millions more, the peasants, the farmers, the laborers, the people who rarely wrote the history books, but lived within every sentence of them. As you rest and let your mind begin to drift, we will gently explore what it truly meant to live under the rule of the samurai class. From the bitter hardships of daily survival, to the ambitions of warlords, to the mysteries of ancient burial rituals, and finally, to the hidden lives behind the paper doors of the elite. You are safe here, and there is no need to follow every detail. Let your imagination wander when it needs to. The story will be waiting for you when you return, so take a slow breath. Imagine the distant creak of bamboo, the rustle of wind through thatched roofs, and the steady beat of time passing quietly through the fields of feudal Japan. Let us begin. Rice and revolt, a peasant's struggle under the samurai. Imagine yourself waking in the dim light of dawn inside a single-room farmhouse. The walls are woven reed, the floor packed earth. There is no glass in the window, just a wooden shutter, half open to let in the cold morning air. You sleep on a straw mat, and nearby your children thin, quiet, already stirring. This is not a life of leisure. You are a peasant in medieval Japan, and the year is somewhere in the 14th century. Each day begins not with possibility, but with duty. Rice is life here, not just your food, but your currency, your tax, your worth. The land you till is not yours. It belongs to a landowner, usually a member of the warrior class, a samurai, and he answers to a daimyo, who in turn bends the knee to a shogun. Power flows upward, burden flows down. Your body aches from the day before stooped in the wet paddies, your hands submerged in cool mud, placing each stalk of rice by hand. The rhythm of the seasons is strict, planting, tending, harvesting, each phase governed by rituals, festivals, and obligations. There's no room for error. A flood, a drought, a stray band of soldiers trampling through it can all mean ruin. And yet, life continues. You boil millet, not rice. It is too valuable to eat regularly. A small piece of pickled radish adds flavor. Maybe some dried fish, if your family was lucky. You chew slowly, already mentally tallying how much of the harvest must go to taxes. The figure is high. Often you'll give up 40 to 60% of your yield, sometimes more. The rest must sustain you through the long winter. You may not have a surname. Those were for samurai and nobility. You are known by your given name, or sometimes simply by your wool farmer, weaver, potter. Your clothes are rough hemp. Your hands are calloused, your back already bent before its time. But life is not entirely joyless. There are rhythms here of birdsong and rain on thatch, of community. Neighbors help one another. Children chase each other between rows of crops. There are songs, simple and haunting, passed down through generations. There are stories by firelight shared under the stars. There is beauty in routine, and resilience in repetition. Still, there are dangers. Bandits roam in the hills. Famine strike unexpectedly. And samurai, yes, the samurai, while bound by codes of honor, are not gentle overlords. A tax not paid in full may bring punishment. A disrespectful look could provoke a beating. During periods of war, your village may be caught between rival factions, conscripting your sons, seizing your grain, or burning everything in retreat. You've heard of icky peasant uprisings, though speaking of them openly is dangerous. In the provinces, when burden became unbearable, Whole communities would rise up against their lords. Sometimes they succeeded, more often they were crushed. Still, the idea lingers like a quiet echo in the back of your mind. Rebellion, change, hope. You are told your place in the social order is necessary, that the samurai protect you, that your work feeds the nation. And in truth, it does. Every castle stone, every blade, every banquet, all were paid for with rice planted by hands like yours. And so the day continues. You bow to the temple shrine as you pass. You share a nod with a neighbor bent over his own patch of earth. The sun climbs, the fields glisten, the scent of tilled soil and green shoots rises around you. The world is heavy, but still moving, still growing, still alive. In the distance, the silhouette of a lone horseman armor gleaming, banners trailing in the wind. A reminder of the world above, a reminder of how little separates peace from war. As night falls, you return home, a small fire, a bowl of millet, the sound of frogs in the patties. Your children sleep in a bundle. Your wife repairs a robe by lamplight, and you listen to the silence. Tomorrow, you will do it all again, because this is your life, and it is the only one you know. Oda Nobunaga, the warlord who changed everything now, lift your gaze from the rice paddies and candlelit farmhouses and look to the hills. There, behind heavy wooden gates and steep stone walls, a different world stirs one of ambition, blood, and power. This is the world of the daimyo, the samurai lord, and at the center of one of the most turbulent centuries in Japanese history stood a man who would change the nation forever. His name ... was Oda Nobunaga. Born in 1534 in Owari province, Nobunaga came into a world in chaos. Japan was not a unified country then, but a fractured land divided into hundreds of warring provinces. Daimyo fought daimyo, castles rose and burned. Alliances were made over sake and broken before sunrise. From the very beginning, Nobunaga was strange. They called him the Fool of Owari. He defied social customs, dressed oddly, and showed little interest in tradition. But beneath that eccentric shell was a mind of pure strategy, calculating, visionary, and ruthless. At just 17, Nobunaga claimed leadership of his clan after his father's death. By 18, he had murdered a rival uncle and crushed the enemies circling his borders. He did not fight like the others. He embraced new tactics, unorthodox alliances, deceptive diplomacy, and most shockingly, firearms. You see, guns had arrived in Japan only a few decades earlier via Portuguese traders. While many samurai scoffed at them, Nobunaga saw their potential. At the 1575 Battle of Nagashino, he positioned 3,000 arquebusiers behind wooden barricades and rotating volleys. This technique, primitive as it sounds now, devastated the traditional cavalry of his enemies. It was a massacre. It was also the future of warfare. Nobunaga's ambition was to unify Japan under a single rule. And to do that, he would have to break centuries of custom. He crushed temples that opposed him, most famously the Enrakuchi, a mountain monastery with warrior monks. He had it burned to the ground. Thousands died. He tore down the old feudal system, replacing hereditary privilege with merit. If a peasant could fight well, Nobunaga made him a general. If a monk plotted rebellion, he was shown no mercy. He welcomed foreign traders, Jesuit missionaries, new technologies. He even wore Western-style clothing on occasion and commissioned European-style maps. But even the most brilliant warlords must sleep with one eye open. In 1582, Nobunaga was betrayed by one of his own Achechi Mitsuhide. While resting at the Honnoji Temple in Kyoto, Nobunaga found himself surrounded. Outnumbered, surprised, and with no path to escape, he set fire to the temple. It is believed he took his own life in the flames, choosing death on his terms. He died before he could finish what he started. But Nobunaga laid the groundwork for what would become a unified Japan. His vassal, Toyotomi Hideyoshi, would continue the work. And after him, Tokugawa Ieyasu would finally bring peace, ushering in a 250-year era of stability known as the Edo period. Nobunaga remains one of Japan's most complex figures. Brutal, yes, but also brilliant, fearless, forward-thinking, a man who shattered the mold to build something new. He tore Japan apart so it could be reborn. Even now, centuries later, his name stirs strong feelings. To some, a tyrant, to others, a hero, to all unforgettable. And somewhere in the hills above the rice fields, the wind still whispers through the ruins of the castle he built. The buried army of Haniwa, guardians of the Japanese dead, long before the rise of samurai and warlords, before castles and banners marked the landscape, there was another Japan, a quieter Japan, a land of mossy hills, ancient rituals, and stone mounds that held secrets, sleeping just beneath the surface. And in these ancient tombs, arranged like silent sentinels, stood the Haniwa. Let your mind drift now, not to the battlefield, but to a misty burial mound in the early morning. Birds flit between pine branches, the air smells of loam and dew, and across the green rise of earth, dozens, sometimes hundreds of strange clay figures stand frozen in place. Horses, warriors, shaman, musicians, courtiers, all sculpted in simple, stylized shapes. Eyes wide, lips pursed, arms folded. They are neither statues nor toys. They are guardians. And they are old, over 1,500 years old. The Haniwa belonged to the Kofun period, a time between the 3rd and 6th centuries Edo. It was an age of powerful chieftains who ruled scattered regions of Japan before the nation was unified. These leaders were buried in enormous keyhole-shaped tombs called kofun, some stretching the length of a football field. But why surround a tomb with hundreds of clay figures? At first, scholars thought the Haniwa were merely decorative. But over time, we've come to understand their deeper purpose. The word Haniwa means circle of clay, and in many ways, that is exactly what they formed, a protective barrier between the world of the living and the realm of the dead. They weren't buried, but placed above ground, often in precise rows encircling the tomb. They may have served as spiritual guardians, protecting the soul of the deceased from evil. Or perhaps they were representations of people and animals important to the one who had passed. A kind of clay court so that the dead would not journey into the afterlife alone. But there's another theory, quieter, more unsettling. Some historians believe that Haniwa replaced earlier, bloodier rituals. That in even older times, when a powerful lord died, his servants, wives, horses, yes, even favorite warriors might have been buried alive with him, as a show of loyalty or power, or fear. As centuries passed, these real sacrifices gave way to symbolic ones, clay instead of flesh, silence instead of screams. A mercy of sorts. The artistry of the Haniwa varies greatly. Some are crude, others are strikingly expressive. A warrior with a sword and round eyes. A priestess mid-gesture, mouth slightly open, a chicken perfectly round, a horse with stylized saddle and wide nostrils. They offer glimpses quiet, fragmented into the daily life, hierarchy, an imagination of a culture otherwise largely lost to time, and then they were forgotten. As Buddhism spread across Japan and the imperial court centralized power, tomb building fell out of fashion. The Haniwa were left to the elements, weathered by centuries of rain, moss, and wind. Many were buried, some shattered. Others stood untouched until rediscovered by archaeologists in the 20th century. Today, museums display them. Replicas stand guard in gardens. And yet, there is something unshakably mysterious about the originals. Something ancient, watchful, not eerie exactly, but solemn, quiet. If you ever find yourself in Japan's countryside, walking among the old hills of the Kofun period, and you spot a small clay figure staring across the landscape, know that you are being watched gently by the guardians of another time, silent protectors of a forgotten age. You are in the residence of a daimyo, a feudal lord, a ruler of lands and armies, bound to the shogunate and master of dozens of vassals. A single misstep could mean exile, disgrace, or death. A visiting official might smile over tea and plot a coup the following week. Spies were common, poison not unheard of. To be daimyo was to live inside a lacquered box with polished beauty outside and pressure from every side within. Still, there were moments of true peace. A game of endless masks. Matchmakers in obedience, love, and duty in feudal Japan. The candles low, the hallways quiet, and behind the shoshi screen, the paper-thin wall between public and private life unfolds with fewer eyes watching. We've wandered through fields, followed warlords, and sat in noble tea rooms. But now we step into the homes of ordinary people to explore a side of history often whispered, rarely written, the private lives of the men and women of feudal Japan. What did it mean to fall in love? To marry? To build a home beneath the watchful gaze of clan, class, and custom? Let's begin with the peasantry, where survival often came before sentiment. In rural villages, marriage was not typically a matter of passion, it was a practical arrangement, overseen by families and often by a local matchmaker called a nakodo. The matchmaker's job was not only to suggest a suitable partner, but to investigate discreetly the family's reputation, land holdings, fertility, and past troubles. It was said that a good matchmaker could sense not only the emotional temperament of a person, but the balance of karma between two households. Families might exchange birth charts and seek out favorable omens. A marriage was not just between two people, it was a contract between two lineages. Weddings were modest but meaningful. A ceremony in the village shrine, a meal shared between families, simple robes, offerings of sake, and, if fortunes allowed, a gift of new tami mats or silken sashes. Love could come later or not at all. Romantic affection was rarely considered essential to a successful union. A wife's primary duty was to bear children, manage the household, and honor her husband's family. A husband was expected to provide, protect, and remain loyal. In most cases, for the samurai class, things grew more complicated. Marriage among samurai was a matter of duty and politics. Women were often wed in their teens, sent to new households to cement alliances between clans. Their lives were filled with ceremonial duties, child-rearing, and maintaining the household while their husbands served in court or on campaign. Samurai wives were not always passive. In fact, some were trained in martial arts, particularly with the naginata, a polearm weapon used to protect the home during times of unrest. In her private quarters, a wife might teach children, manage servants, and write letters to her husband on the battlefield, carefully worded, restrained, often poetic. And yet, emotion still lived in the shadows. In diaries and poems, we find glimpses of deep yearning. A samurai wife writing about the scent of plum blossoms that reminded her of a husband gone to war. A village girl leaving a love note tied to a branch at the shrine. A matchmaker who secretly longed for the very woman she helped find a husband. Infidelity happened, but it was judged differently depending on one's gender. A man's straying was tolerated, even expected, especially among the elite. A woman's, however, could bring shame upon the entire family. Divorce, while rare, did exist. In peasant villages, it might be as simple as a husband writing a few lines of dismissal. For samurai and merchant families, it required approval, negotiation, and often the return of the bride's dowry. Among the merchant class, particularly in later centuries, marriage became more transactional. Love might follow success or remain a distant possibility. In larger towns like Edo or Kyoto, love was often sought not in marriage, but in the floating world of pleasure quarters, where courtesans and geisha offered companionship, conversation, and sometimes illusions of romance. Yet even here, the lines between duty and desire blurred. Not all marriages were loveless. Some letters and poetry revealed tenderness husbands expressing gratitude for their wives' sacrifices. Wives writing verses of quiet devotion. A well-paired couple was seen as a blessing. In an older age, even those married through duty often found companionship, shared memory, and a peaceful kind of intimacy. It's worth remembering that for most of Japan's history, emotions were not discussed openly. Love was subtle, private, and veiled in metaphor. A falling leaf, a sudden shower, the sound of footsteps fading down a corridor. These were how one spoke of longing, of loss, of love. And so, behind the walls of homes both grand and humble, life carried on. Babies were born, sandals were placed neatly by the door, ink brushed across rice paper, and two lives joined by family, by fortune, by quiet resilience, shared the rhythm of seasons. Cherry blossoms fell, the moon waxed and waned. And love, whether arranged or discovered, was carried gently like a folded fan in the sleeve of a kimono. And so our journey through feudal Japan draws to a close. From the muddy paddies of the peasant to the stone keeps of the daimyo, from war and rebellion to tea and tenderness, we've wandered gently through a world both distant and deeply human. Let your thoughts settle now. Let the stories fade into soft silence. You are safe. You are at rest. Tomorrow, the fields will glisten again. The tea will be poured. The guardians will keep watch. And the past will wait for you patiently beneath the falling cherry blossoms. Good night.